It was just supposed to be lunch. A quiet Sunday, nothing on the calendar, no plans except for Sarah stopping by around noon. She was a colleague, sharp, composed, the kind of person who made every room feel more serious just by walking into it. I hadn't told her much about the neighborhood, and honestly, I didn't think I needed to. But this neighborhood had a way of introducing itself. For the past 3 weeks, our HOA has rolled out a brand new security team. Their words, not mine. A handful of men in pressed uniforms who seem to wake up every morning genuinely excited about enforcing rules nobody asked for. Gate checks, visitor logs, unnecessary stops. They had discovered authority and they were going to use every last drop of it. I was inside setting the table when my phone buzzed. I didn't know it yet, but lunch was about to become something else entirely. Sarah pulled up to the gate at 12:07 p.m. I know the time because she texted me she was close. What I didn't know was that she would spend the next several minutes being treated like a suspect at a federal checkpoint. The 2 guards on duty stopped her immediately. No greeting, no courtesy, just hands raised in a tone that made it clear they had already decided she didn't belong here. They demanded her ID, asked who she was visiting, why she was visiting, and what she had in her car. Sarah answered every question calmly and clearly. That wasn't enough. One of them told her to step out of the vehicle. When she asked why, he grabbed her arm without hesitation. Firm, deliberate, completely unprovoked. Her phone was in her hand. The other guards snatched it before she could do anything, telling her she'd get it back when they were finished. They kept her there for nearly 15 minutes, no cause, no explanation. Just 2 men who had confused a uniform for unlimited power. By the time they let her go, the damage was already done. She drove to my house, parked, and sat in the car for a full minute before coming inside. The moment she walked through my door, I knew something was wrong. Sarah never looked rattled. That was just who she was. Steady, unshakable, the kind of person who handled pressure the way most people handle a light breeze. But standing in my hallway, her jaw was tight, and her eyes carried something I had never seen in them before. Not fear. Something colder than that. She sat down, set her bag carefully on the table, and told me everything. Every question they asked. The arm grab. The stolen phone. The 15 minutes of humiliation dressed up as a procedure. I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. The words hit like something physical. When she finished, the room was completely silent. Then she looked at me with a calm that was somehow more unsettling than anger, and said quietly, "They have no idea what they just did." I believed her immediately. I gave Richard the benefit of the doubt. I shouldn't have. I called him within minutes, walking him through everything Sarah had told me. The unauthorized stop, the physical contact, the confiscated phone. I kept my voice level. I was giving him a chance to do the right thing, and part of me genuinely believed he would take it. He didn't. He told me his team was trained to follow protocol. He said that visitors who cooperated had nothing to worry about. Then he said something that made my hand tighten around the phone. He suggested that maybe Sarah had made the situation more difficult than it needed to be, as if dignity was the provocation. An hour later, a formal written warning arrived at my door, printed on HOA letterhead, signed by Richard himself, advising me to ensure future guests understood community standards before visiting. Sarah read it without a word. She set it down on the table, picked up her phone, and made a call that lasted less than 2 minutes. I couldn't hear the details. I didn't need to. The expression on her face when she hung up told me everything. Richard had just made the worst decision of his life. The next morning arrived like a verdict. At 7:45 a.m., 4 unmarked vehicles rolled through the neighborhood entrance in a single, unhurried line. 2 police cruisers followed close behind. No sirens, no urgency, just quiet, absolute authority moving at its own pace, completely unbothered by anything Richard's laminated rulebook had to say. I was on my porch when it happened, coffee in hand, still half asleep, until I wasn't. Sarah stepped out of the lead vehicle in a charcoal suit, badge visible, face unreadable. Behind her came 2 investigators in plain clothes and 3 uniformed officers who looked like they had done this 100 times before and would do it 100 times again without blinking. Richard appeared at the clubhouse door in a golf shirt and a look of total disbelief. He started talking immediately about jurisdiction, about protocol, about rights. Sarah let him finish. Then she held up her badge, looked at him evenly, and said, "I am the jurisdiction." The officers moved in. The two guards who had stopped Sarah the day before were identified, approached, and placed in handcuffs with an efficiency that left no room for argument. One of them kept repeating that it was just a misunderstanding. Nobody responded. The other one went completely silent the moment the cuffs clicked. Neighbors had begun gathering on their lawns. Phones were out. Nobody was going inside. Richard stood completely still, the formal warning letter he had sent me still sitting on his desk inside, already evidence. The arrests were just the beginning. Once the investigators moved inside the clubhouse, what they found painted a picture far uglier than a single gate incident. Falsified incident reports stretching back nearly 2 years, unauthorized surveillance footage of residents was taken without consent or disclosure, a filing cabinet stuffed with formal complaints from neighbors, complaints that had been received, documented, and deliberately buried. And then there was the money. The HOA security budget, funded entirely by resident dues, had been quietly redirected, invoices for equipment that never arrived, payments to a private contractor that didn't exist, a paper trail that led, with very little effort, directly back to Richard's recent home renovation and a weekend trip billed as a community planning retreat. The guards themselves had no licensing, no training certification, no legal authority to detain, search, or touch anyone. They were simply men who had been handed uniforms and told they had power, and they had believed it completely. Sarah stood outside facing a small gathering of reporters and said, with the same calm she had carried since the moment she walked through my door, "This was not a misunderstanding. This was a pattern, and it ends today." The clubhouse door was taped shut behind her. By evening, it was over. The HOA was formally suspended pending a full investigation. Richard had submitted his resignation before noon, quietly through a lawyer, without a single word to the community he had spent years controlling. The guards were facing charges of unlawful detainment and impersonation of law enforcement officers. The neighborhood, for the first time in months, was completely still. Sarah stopped by my porch just before sunset. She had changed out of her suit, and for the first time all day, she looked like someone who had simply come over for lunch. I asked her if she thought Richard had learned anything. She thought about it for a moment, then smiled faintly and said, "He learned that a uniform means nothing without integrity behind it." She was right. Real authority was never loud. It never needed to be. It just showed up,